Atkins and his piece, How I Learned to Smile. Atkins, also known as Dirt, Son of Earth, is a self-taught mixed media artist based out of Tampa Bay, Florida. His work is rooted in automatic art and collage, and according to his biography, quote, combines the found and repurposed with the spontaneous and intuitive in order to somehow end human suffering, end quote. And that right there is an interesting point of departure as we begin to look at this piece. What jumps out immediately here for me is a somewhat surreptitious or hidden dialogue between two very different technological regimes. Really, we could say two ways of life that have been doing a public yet ideologically mitigated battle in the early decades of the 21st century. The technology writer and co-founder of Wired magazine, Kevin Kelly, has termed these two ways of life or technological regimes and their respective adherents as the people of the book and the people of the screen. The people of the book for Kelly are the people who still maintain a fidelity as best they can to the pre-digital way of life. They still root themselves in a Gutenberg-based media universe, have a loyalty to analog forms of production and social interactivity, and even hold a remedial, natural, Newtonian Cartesian outlook towards the world at large. The people on the screen, on the far, far other hand, are those who have either fully accepted or have been born into the era of digital technologies and full-blown capitalist globalization. The people of the screen are entirely comfortable in integrating themselves and their brains with technology and the various appendages that are now part of our technological-based world. They are, for the most part, post-Gutenberg individuals, and their view of the surrounding cosmos is more influenced by quantum mechanics and string theory versus the more traditional Newtonian Cartesian model. And of course, this same tension has been expressed in other theoretical models as well. The Polish sociologist Zygmunt Bauman has referred to these two regimes as solid modernity, which would be akin to where the people of the book were dominant, and liquid modernity, the age where the people of the screen take control. Another one is the French philosopher Gilles Deleuze in his seminal 1990 essay Postscripts on the Societies of Control. He framed this ideological clash as a shift from discipline to control. But in any event, what we are dealing with right now in the world, and what this piece I think tries to account for, is this irreducible tension between these two technological regimes. On one hand, we have the Gutenberg-based linear model of media and even thought that reaches its peak in the mid to late 20th century. And then the mutation of that very analog-based system into the networks, global satellites, and microelectronic technologies of the 21st century. So when you look at this piece, what is interesting is that we have a background of abstract art, just bright colors draped over the canvas that give this polarized battle a sense of neutrality. The abstract background is almost like the mainstream media of today. It doesn't explain this tension for us. We are forced, and perhaps Atkins is calling us to do the theoretical labor ourselves. And then in the foreground is where we can actually see the battle that I've been speaking of, this ideological battle between two technological models or regimes actually take place. So the first side is represented with a series of magazine cutouts of various people smiling, prototypical Americans, American consumers, you could say. And these fragments of old print media represent what Kelly has called the people of the book. And this is just a greater representation of the Gutenberg media universe that reaches its high point in the mid-20th century, and then begins to steadily decline with a series of electrical and microelectronic and then digital technologies that are introduced into public space at the turn of the 21st century. Of course, the great magazines of 20th century America, Time Magazine, Life, Sports Illustrated, these are all representations of the sunset period, or the end of the Gutenberg universe. The final act of print media, that had been developing for a couple hundred years and really fundamentally related to the rise of industrialization, democracy, and industrial-based capitalism as well. So that is one half of the battle, these Gutenbergian fragments that are just splashed across the canvas that come to represent not only the often not recognized background of our Gutenbergian-based psyche, our collective historic psyche, but also the fact that this way of organizing both the media as well as our various psychic processes, things like linear thinking, hierarchically organized models, and an ocular-based society. This is one of the things that McLuhan said. These are all in the process of just kind of imploding, collapsing. It's breaking down all around us. And they are imploding precisely because you have this rip into the social fabric. And this is represented right in the canvas here. This tear into the fabric of the canvas with some kind of electrical or computational circuitry, a digital circuit board, which signifies the whole digital regime and the emergence of the people of the screen. And it really just protrudes from internal to the canvas with very little care or concern for any damage it may be causing to its surroundings. And clearly, with these Gutenbergian fragments everywhere, there is damage. And of course, when we look at, the countless factories that have been closed down in places like Pennsylvania and Ohio and Michigan, or the countless small-town newspapers that have been put out of business by social media and this new digital-based media universe, we can see what Atkins is saying is not some highbrow artistic theory. This is a very practical, this is a matter-of-fact observation of something that's really happening in our world. Someone like Kevin Kelly, who really was one of the great apologists for the digital regime and the people of the screen, often frames this clash in very neutral terms. He calls it something like, quote-unquote, disruption, a much-used term today that almost has a benevolent connotation now. Companies and markets really want to be disruptive. They want to be considered a disruptor. The Harvard Business School professor Clayton Christensen is another one of these great ideologues that is reframing the idea of disruption as a positive thing. We want to be now disruptive, and it has an edgy, hip feeling to it. But Atkins, I think, in this piece is drawing our attention not only to the fact that this so-called disruption is far from a purely benevolent process, but also to the fact that we don't even really know what this disruption is. We literally have no idea what we are dealing with. We don't know what this quote-unquote technological big other, this is the term that has been developed by Shoshana Zuboff in her recent text, Surveillance Capitalism. We don't know what this technological big other wants from us. We don't know what it wants for itself other than to grow like a virus. It just emerges into our once orderly Gutenbergian lives and as some kind of thing But the problem is we don't know what this thing is or what it wants. And this brings me actually to the part of the piece that I really like the most, which is the title, How I Learned to Smile. And I think Atkins is precisely correct here in his solution to this very dangerous predicament. What exactly do we do here in the 21st century as the technological big other takes over everything? What do we do? How do we respond to this thing? Well, first and foremost, we have to learn to smile. Even with all the chaos, even with all the disruption, even with all the violence, we have to smile. And of course, the reason why we have to smile is because when we smile, when we can have a sense of calmness in our being and accept our cosmic and spiritual and really our political predicament, we can move from that place of acceptance, from that place of smiling. We can try to actually do something. And when we take action from that place, we can do it in a much more grounded, sane, rational, and empathetic way. And you know, when we're not smiling, then we only contribute to the chaos. We give fuel to the technological big other, as we see every day with these violent back and forths on sites like Twitter and Facebook. How I Learned to Smile by Adam Ray Atkins. Mixed media on wood panel, 11 by 11 inches, acrylic paint, magazine clippings, circuit board, found metal pieces, and small plastic. Shut up.